From Egypt to the world, we don't just teach, we transform, we lead, we build the future together. This is Edu-Next-AI, where ideas ignite, empowering minds with knowledge and insight. The next generation starts here, and why? Because tomorrow begins at Edu-Next-AI. At Edu-Next-AI.
Welcome to Edu-Next-AI. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining us for this exclusive Edu-Next-AI session, part of our ongoing commitment to innovation and inclusion in education. Tonight, we are thrilled to present a powerful session titled Universal Design for Learning, Unlocking Every Student's Potential, delivered by a truly inspiring educator and leader in the field, Ms. Christine A. Parsons. Ms. Parsons is the program manager at the Toni Jennings Exceptional Educational Institution at the University of Central Florida, where she works to champion its inclusive education for students with exceptional needs, with over a decade of classroom experience in STEM and strong academic foundation, including degrees in medical, laboratory, technology, education, and modeling and simulation. Ms. Parsons brings a unique and holistic perspective to the challenges and opportunities in education today. Her professional focus spans artificial intelligence in education, especially for students with disabilities, promoting the STEM education across diverse learning contexts, universal design for learning, the very topic we are exploring tonight. Ms. Christine is a problem solver at heart, a lifelong learner, and an advocate for accessible, engaging learning environments for all students. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Ms. Christine A. Parsons as she leads us in this timely and transformative session. Thank you, Ms. Christine, for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, especially with this diverse audience. So I'm going to try and explain everything I can about universal design for learning. I know that we're very far apart, but our goals and our ideas are probably very similar. So it's okay. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully technology will be working with us. So I'm going to assume that everyone can see my slide presentation now. If you can't, please let me know. But thank you so much again for having me here. As Dr. Saeed said, I work at the Toni Jennings Exceptional Education Institute. Tonight, we're going to cover a little bit about the Institute and a lot about universal design for learning, what it is, what the goal of UDL is, and then we'll go over some examples and some challenges that you might have in the work that you do. I know there may be a lot of questions, so if you want to add your questions to the chat, we'll have time either during or after the presentation to go through all of those as well. So what I'd like to know is a little bit about you. So if you would put in the chat a little bit about where you're from and what your role in education is. We can go through a couple of them and just see. I'm interested really in finding out what types of students you currently are teaching, or are you in a different role where you're not actually in the classroom? Either way, all of you can use the principles that we'll be going through today you think about your position and your work and how to be able to address many different types of people. So we have primary. Here we go. University. So we have a lot of different levels. That's great. So I'm a chemistry teacher. So I'm not in the classroom anymore, but I love talking chemistry with anybody that will listen. It's not always easy to find chemistry teachers here in the work that I do here. So they laugh at me when I'm like, oh, can I talk chemistry with you? Okay. English teacher, excellent. That's great. Primary school. All right, keep filling those in because I'll be able to save the chat. I'm interested in finding out what types of things that you are teaching and then where you're located. So the Toni Jennings Institute services students with disabilities locally, nationally, and internationally. Our mission is to prepare teachers, administrators, and related service providers to serve our community. Our community is students with disabilities, but we all know that every student will have a disability at some point in their educational career. So our team focuses on research, communication, behavior, and independent living and career preparation for all of our students. Our vision is a world where children with disabilities are supported by highly skilled, compassionate professionals who foster their growth and success. And I know by reaching out to all of you that you are highly compassionate professionals because you're taking time out of your busy schedules, especially at the end of, I'm sure, what was a long day to attend this session. So I want you to know how much I appreciate that. So these are some of the programs that we have. We do a lot of work with educators, but we also do a lot of research. You can see we span the age group of pre-K all the way to adult living. And we have kind of 4 areas that we focus on. It's our education programs. We have workforce preparation programs. We do a lot with technology, which you'll see in the presentation when I talk about that. And then disseminating the information that we have. So this is an opportunity for me to disseminate our information on the work that we do to an international audience. And I want you to know how much I do appreciate your time again. So as we begin, I want you to stop and think about your students, and especially those students that struggle in school. What if we could create a classroom where every student could thrive? As we go through each of the slides, this is something that I want you to think first in your mind. If I could make sure that every student could thrive in their education, what would that look like? So as we do that, how familiar are you with universal design for learning? I think that Dr. Saeed has a poll that we're going to try. If you want to launch the poll now.
Yes, I will
And
use it now. Just a minute. Is it appear to you the poll?
yes, I can see the poll.
Okay,
So the question
yes,
is,
they
how
asked
familiar are you
answer.
with universal design for learning? So you've never heard of it, you've heard of the term, you know a little. Okay. Excellent. We'll give another few seconds. Great. It looks like we have a good mix of people, especially people that have never heard of it. So if you've heard of the term but aren't familiar of how it's used, or you've never heard of it, by the end of this session, I promise you will know more than you ever thought possible. Most of the people here have never heard of it, so that's great. All right. I'm going to end the poll now. Thank you so much for that. That gives me a better understanding of how to begin and how to make sure that I'm giving you exactly what you need. So While we're thinking of that, I want to start this little video just to give you an idea of where we are starting from. Hopefully the sound will work.
Hi, welcome to Shoe Town. Do you need a new pair of shoes?
Sure, I'm looking for a new pair of running shoes.
I've got just what you need. I'll be right back. Here you go.
Thanks. These won't fit. They're too big.
Well, that's no good. Let me get another pair. How about these?
Oh, these are still too big. I wear a size 10.
I'm sorry, sir. Come again?
I said I wear a size 10 shoe.
I'm afraid I don't follow you.
My shoe size, it's 10. You know, like the size of shoes I wear?
I'm afraid you must be mistaken, sir. All of our shoes are the same size. Here, let me get a different shoe.
Is it going to be the same size as the first pair?
Well, of course.
This isn't going to work. I think I'm going to go.
Wait, we got a new shipment coming in. Oh well.
We wouldn't go to a shoe store that only sold one size of shoe. So why do we try to teach students only one way? Universal Design for Learning is about teaching all students, not just the average students. To do this, we need to represent information in multiple ways, give students opportunities to choose how to express themselves and show us what they've learned, and make the learning engaging and relevant for everyone. We need to listen to our students' needs, cater our teaching styles to their learning styles, and make sure they stay engaged. By doing so, we'll create a better learning experience for everyone.
You don't need to watch that again. So when we think about what UDL is, we want to think about our students first and think about that video that you just saw. If you were to go to a store where they didn't have your size shoe, you would leave. You would not be engaged. You would not care about what they have to say, and you would just check out. It's the same thing in our schools. When we're creating lessons, one type of lesson for all of our students, yes, we'll meet the needs of some of our students, but what about those in the margins? Think about your students and how diverse your current classroom is, the different types of students that you have. I bet there is no average student. The research shows that when we do teach to the average, there's a large percentage of students that miss out. So when we think about traditional teaching, we assume that all of our students are the same and that the lessons will meet the needs of the average student, but they don't. So when we design lessons for the middle or the average student, we miss many students at either end of the bell curve. We know all of our classrooms, I know it's true here, and I'm sure it's true in your classrooms, are more diverse than ever before. So you might have a student who's a non-native speaker, or a student with an unseen disability like dyslexia, or one who finishes everything early, and then another who struggles with motivation. So as teachers, we're expected to reach all of them with one lesson. That's a lot to ask of us and of our students. So the UDL framework provides suggestions. It's not something that you have to follow exactly, but they provide suggestions that can be applied to many different types of disciplines to ensure that learners can access and participate in the learning opportunities. So I want you to take a look at this diagram. This is from a resource called Dive into UDL. I have the link listed here, but I also have it at the end of the presentation, and I will share this presentation with everyone. But it's a free resource about what UDL is and then how to incorporate it into the work that you do. So if we look at the first slide in the upper left, we see some fans watching a baseball game, and they have equal access. There's a barrier in front of them, but they all have a box to stand on. Now, for the first student in light blue, they can see the game perfectly. For the second participant, they have to reach high to be able to look over the fence. They can see it, but it's not easy. And then this third tiny little guy can't see anything at all, even though they all have equal opportunities to be able to stand on a box. If you go to the next slide on the top right, you see, let's talk about equity. So now they've moved one box over, so the tall person can still see the game. It's a little bit more difficult for them, but they can see it. The middle person is standing on two boxes, so they can see the game better. And then the last person can see the game better. So it's equal, but it's not very comfortable for them, is it? That barrier is still there. So what if we removed the barrier completely? Then we see at the bottom right, now there's no barrier. All of the participants get to see the game. But you know what's even better? Let them participate. Let them play in the game. That's inclusion. And UDL is designed to give you a framework or an idea about not only removing barriers that exist within our classrooms now for many different types of students, but also to remove the barriers enough that they can also play in the game. There's no more fence and everyone plays. So when you think about some of the things going on in your classroom, think about what are barriers to learning that exist in my lesson plans or in my classroom or systemically within the school itself. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm going to be able to help you answer all of these questions tonight. It's just a way for us to start the conversation and start thinking about where the barriers exist, how they're preventing students from accessing knowledge, and how we can work together to be able to remove those barriers. So UDL is a framework designed by Dr. Rose and his colleagues from a corporation called CAST. CAST has many resources on their website that I'll share that information with you. But their definition of what is UDL is a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning based on what we know about the human brain. Each brain is made up of billions of interconnected neurons that form unique pathways. Like fingerprints, no two brains are alike. So again, if we're teaching to students that have a brain that's completely different from any other brain we've ever seen, we have to think about, how am I going to create my lesson plans to reach these students? So the UDL framework supports learner agency. And what I mean by that is supporting the learner in terms of what they need to be able to access knowledge. So we want so we're going to support learners by allowing the student to actively participate in making choices in service of our learning goals. So the goal of UDL is to change the environment rather than think that it's the student that's the problem. When environments are intentionally designed to reduce those barriers that I mentioned, then every learner can engage in rigorous, meaningful learning. When we look at this list, it helps us to think about what learner agency is. For learning to occur, students need these ideas to be embedded in their lessons. They need to be purposeful. We all know that we learn better when we know that what we're learning is something that is relegated to our life. We need it to be reflective. Is the student motivated for learning, and what are they thinking about the learning that you're providing? Is it resourceful? Are we understanding the strengths of the students that we're serving or their weaknesses, and can we help them? Is it authentic? Are they genuinely interested in the topic? Is it strategic? Do we have students setting goals and monitoring their learning so that they can see that they are achieving? And is it action-oriented? Is it self-directed? When you have those students that are very interested in whatever the topic is that you're teaching, that they become highly engaged and self-directed, and they only want to know more. And that's the environment that we want to create, is an environment where students are excited about learning and that we're helping them to become lifelong learners. So I have another video I'm going to show that gives a little bit more. This is from CAS, and it gives a little bit more at UDL at a glance. And then after the video, we're going to break each one of the sections down in a little bit more detail.
This teacher needs to meet a curriculum goal, and she's got a very diverse group of students. And so does this teacher. And this one. Most do. In fact, research shows that the way people learn is as unique as their fingerprints. What does this mean for teachers of today? Classrooms are highly diverse, and curriculum needs to be designed from the start to meet this diversity. Universal design for learning is an approach to curriculum that minimizes barriers and maximizes learning for all students. Whoa, that's a fancy term. Universal design for learning. Let's unpack it a bit. Let's think about the word universal. By universal, we mean curriculum that can be used and understood by everyone. Each learner in a classroom brings her own background, strengths, needs, and interests. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student. Now let's think about the word learning. Learning is not one thing. Neuroscience tells us that our brains have three broad networks: one for recognition, the what of learning, one for skills and strategies, the how of learning, and one for caring and prioritizing, the why of learning. Students need to gain knowledge, skills, and enthusiasm for learning, and a curriculum needs to help them do all three. But every learner is unique, and one size does not fit all. So how do we make a curriculum that challenges and engages diverse learners? This is where the word design comes in. A universally designed building is planned to be flexible and to accommodate all kinds of users, with and without disabilities. It turns out that if you design for those in the margins, your building works better for everyone. Curb cuts and ramps are used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, and people on bikes. Captioning on TV serves people who are deaf, people learning English, people in gyms, and spouses who get to sleep at different times. UDL takes this idea and applies it to the design of flexible curriculum. UDL goes beyond access because we need to build in support and challenge. So how do we use the UDL framework to make learning goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone? First, ask yourself, what is my goal? What do I want my students to know, do, and care about? Then ask, what barriers in the classroom might interfere with my diverse students reaching these goals? To eliminate the barriers, use the 3 UDL principles to create flexible paths to learning so that each student can progress. Number 1, provide multiple means of representation. Present content and information in multiple media and provide varied supports. Use graphics and animation, highlight the critical features, activate background knowledge, and support vocabulary so that students can acquire the knowledge being taught. Number 2, provide multiple means of action and expression. Give students plenty of options for expressing what they know and provide models, feedback, and supports for their different levels of proficiency. Number 3, provide multiple means of engagement. What fires up one student won't fire up another. Give students choices to fuel their interests and autonomy. Help them risk mistakes and learn from them. If they love learning, they will persist through challenges. And remember, always keep in mind the learning goal. Get rid of barriers caused by the curriculum and keep the challenge where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, quick recap. Show the information in different ways, allow your students to approach learning tasks and demonstrate what they know in different ways, and offer options that engage students and keep their interest. Universal design for learning equals learning opportunities for all. For more information on UDL, go to www.cast.org.
Okay, so cast.org has all the information about universal design for learning. It has many, many resources, and you can go on YouTube and look for videos. But what I'd like to do now is to go through their framework bit by bit and really take it apart so that you can understand how to use this chart. So this chart, it's available online. You can get it through cast.org. And these are the guidelines of the UDL framework. So we're going to start at the top where you see engagement, representation, and action and expression. So each column listed talks about each one of those areas. And you can see the little brains that are located on the chart. That kind of gives you an idea that when we're speaking about each of these areas, we're really speaking about accessing different parts of the brain. So the engagement part is the why of learning. We're going to access that part of the brain that students become motivated by. Why are we learning this? Why do I care whether or not hydrogen has one proton or two? As teachers, it's going to be important for us to make sure that we are providing information to our students so that they understand of the why of learning. Representation is the what of learning. And then action and expression is the how of learning. How are we doing this? So as we move forward, think about each one of these areas. What we're doing is accessing different parts of the brain to be able to motivate our students to stay engaged. Okay, so let's take a look at engagement, the why of learning. So here are some examples of ways that you can help to engage your students in the why of learning. One big one is choice in learning. If you have options for students, you can have one learning goal that you're interested in them participating. But if they have a choice in how they can access that information, then they're going to do that in a way that helps them to become engaged with the learning. So an example would be to gamify lessons using point systems or badges or interactive games. Or it could be as simple as they can read a book or watch a video. We want to make sure that the information is culturally relevant. We have many different cultures here in the United States. So we want to make sure that we're respecting those cultures and where those students come from and what kind of backgrounds they come from as well. And then we want to create authenticity. So we want to connect the learning to relevant, meaningful experiences that they have. So if we think about this principle, it focuses on motivating and sustaining student interest. So a great example is thinking about, why are you here tonight? You're interested in the topic, or it's meaningful to your work, so you want to know more, and you're giving up a restful evening to learn more. That's true motivation. So I'm hoping I'm going to be able to keep that motivation going. But we can do the same for our students in every lesson that we have. We need to find the meaning for them and help them to find the meaning themselves of why it's important. So now let's think of representation. So representation is the what of learning. So everyone approaches content differently based on their past experiences and their perceptions. So learning and the transfer of learning occur when multiple representations and perspectives are used because they support learners to make connections within as well as between different concepts. And we know that's how people learn, right? You make connections from what you already know to what you're trying to learn. So in short, there's not one means of representation that will be optimal for every learner, but we can provide options for that representation, and that's essential. So for example, one thing is we can provide a reading passage for a student to read, but also add an audio narration or an infographic. We can highlight key information, create diagrams, or any other supports that a student may need. This is especially true in, well, in science and for speakers of other languages, right? That when you have vocabulary lists or translations for speakers of other languages, it's a huge support in allowing them to access the knowledge that you're trying to portray. They don't have to necessarily have the vocabulary. They don't need to memorize vocabulary, but you want them to understand the knowledge. So for example, I always said in my chemistry classroom, chemistry is like speaking another language. Students come into the classroom and they don't know the terms that are required to understand chemistry is. So even though I was teaching science, I spent a lot of time on vocabulary, the vocabulary of science, so that then my students would have that background information to be able to access the concepts that were being present, that I was trying to present, and that they would learn the concepts by understanding the vocabulary. Okay, so now let's talk about action and expression. This is the how of learning. Action and expression, so we're thinking about how students learn, right? Learners differ in their approaches to navigating a learning environment. They differ in how they engage with the learning process and how they express that knowledge. So therefore, it's essential to design and to honor these varying forms of action and expression. An example I use is that I love doing laboratory experiments. I feel very comfortable in a lab. And if you want me to talk about doing anything in the lab, I'm there, I'm engaged, and I have a lot of knowledge there. But if you ask me to draw something, I have no artistic ability at all, and I would not be able to do it, and I would feel like a failure. So for me as a teacher, I want to make sure that I honor my students' strengths and their abilities to let me know how they are learning the knowledge and how they are gaining that information that I'm trying to portray for them. So if I have a student that's very artistic and they want to create some beautiful diagram about what they've learned in my class, I'm going to accept that because they're demonstrating that they know the information and that they understand the information, and they're using their gifts of drawing or artistic ability to be able to show that to me. If there's another student wants to write a 10-page paper, which never happens, but if they wanted to, I would accept that too. If they were interested in that writing process, then I would allow them to be able to show me that they understand that knowledge by using their strengths. Okay, back to our diagram here. So now we've talked about these three different columns and what they mean, but this framework also has rows that has more information that can break each one of these things down for us to think about it a little bit more deeply. So let's talk about the rows, which includes access, support, and executive function. And we'll discuss each one as they relate to engagement, representation, and action and expression. So let's talk about access. UDL improves access by ensuring that every student can stay motivated and learn. That's engagement. They understand the content, and they can demonstrate that they understand the content through representation and action and expression. So they're accessing through different types of representations that you're providing, and then they're able, through different types of action and expression, show that they understand the lesson that you're imparting on them, and that they have access to the the learning environment and the knowledge that you're trying to give them. So it's not about lowering expectations, and I don't want you to think that at all. It's about removing the unnecessary barriers. If you have a student that is at a different reading level, and we'll talk a lot about that, you want them to be able to have access to the material, to the content, but you may have to adjust the reading level for those students. When we think about engagement, how we improve access is to offer choices in topics or materials connected to the lessons, and to create something that's cultural and personal to their experience. You want to make sure that you're providing clear expectations and routines as well, and that will help to reduce things like anxiety. So an example is a teacher could invite students to pick between reading a story that's something local going on or an international story about a particular topic. And that way you're making the content personally meaningful to those students. When we think about representation, we can improve that by using multiple formats of representing the information that we're trying to portray. So that could be having a video, having audio, and having text. If you notice through this presentation that I'm giving you now, there's lots of different ways that I'm going to be imparting the same information. We have visuals, we have videos, I have handouts, I am speaking about it, and all of those ways I'm hoping will reach you in some way or some form. Even using the closed captions, I know English may not be your first language, so by adding the closed captions, it's hopefully helping you to be able to understand the content a little bit more deeply. And the fact that we're recording this means you can access this information again later. These are all ideas around universal design for learning that I'm using in this presentation, and you can easily use yourself. So again, thinking about representation, clarifying vocabulary words with glossaries or visuals is huge, and highlighting key ideas using diagrams or examples and scaffolding information is another way that we can provide different representations to meet our students where they are. So then when we talk about action and expression and how we improve access, we can allow different response options. So when you're assessing your students, you can have them assessed orally, written, visually, using digital programs. You can use graphic organizers. You can offer assistive technologies like speech to text. So instead of only, let's say, a written report, maybe students can create a podcast episode or draw an infographic or record a short video explaining the topic that you're interested in having them understand. Okay, so now let's talk about support. So UDL support is about getting students beyond access, helping them to stay motivated, making meaning of their content, and to organize their thinking so they can succeed independently over time. So when we think about support and engagement, we want to think about how we provide our support to students to help them to be engaged. One thing is to break tasks into manageable steps. That reduces the overwhelming amount of knowledge or content that we're trying to create. We can always provide encouragement and feedback. These are things that I'm sure most of you are doing. I hope that all of you are doing in your classroom already. And then adding that universal design for learning, how can we improve or make sure that we're reaching all of our students? And that's how this framework is designed, right? Things that we're doing already, and then we can add a deeper layer, thinking of that UDL framework to be able to make sure that we're accessing or that we're helping all of our students. So for example, during a group project, the teacher can give students a simple progress tracker and check-ins with small goals to make sure that they're staying on task. Then when we think of representation, how do we provide support for representation? Well, that could be as simple as using a graphic organizer or a concept map, or providing examples of the work that you're looking for. Again, vocabulary and background knowledge are so important. For example, reading a new text, the teacher can give maybe a story map with some guidelines or questions that the students can use while reading to be able to understand the bigger picture. And then when we think of action and expression, how we provide support is like giving templates or rubrics, or giving examples, or giving step-by-step instructions. So for example, before a student gives a presentation, you can provide a checklist to make sure that they have all of the information in their presentation before they actually present. So now I want to talk about executive function. And if you're not familiar with executive function, I never assume. Executive function is like the air traffic control of the brain. It's the prefrontal cortex of your brain that really helps to self-regulate and to plan out what your actions are going to be. It's a very important concept in education. And a lot of the times we forget that especially our younger students, do not have fully developed brains. And the last thing to develop is their executive function abilities. So we have to be really careful here at making sure that we're teaching our students how to use executive function skills and how to improve them. So UDL helps this by providing choices and relevance to make it easier for students to stay focused on what they're doing. So predictable routines reduces the mental load of figuring out what's next. One thing we forget too as teachers sometimes is the mental load that students go through on a daily basis. I have a son that has an auditory processing disability, and I can remember when he was in school, he would come home exhausted because he would be trying so hard in school to process the information within his classes that he was exhausted by the time he would get home from school. And he's doing great. He's very successful now, and we worked really hard to help him. But it took a lot of work, and it took a lot of these concepts to be able to help him to understand how he learns and how he is able to access knowledge. And many of the strategies that we're talking about and that he still uses today as an adult. So, for example, when we talk about engagement, a teacher can let a student choose between a debate or a poster or a journal entry about a particular topic. Then when we talk about representation, how UD helps is offering visual supports, audio, and scaffolding so that students don't have to hold all of that information in their head. That's a really difficult thing to do. For me, even as an adult, is to hold a lot of information in my head at one time and then be able to shift perspectives when I need to. So by providing those visual supports is really helpful in terms of getting through that executive function control. So an example would be, instead of relying only on oral instructions, you can provide checklists, either visual checklists or things written on the board, so that students don't have to rely solely on memory. And then when we think of action and expression and executive function, breaking the big projects into small steps with timelines can reduce that overwhelming feeling. So having templates or models or digital tools can help students organize their work. So for example, when writing an essay, you can give a graphic organizer and a clear rubric so the students can understand how to plan and to self-check their own progress, which is really important for them to learn. So now again, when you start looking at this chart, I'm very confident that some of these things you're already doing for your students. Organizing the information in this way, though, will help you to think about, well, I'm doing this for certain areas, for certain students, but are there any barriers that I'm leaving in place for my students that I'm not even aware of? And then by going through your lessons and going through the ideas of thinking about your lesson planning, this tool is a guide or a suggestion for you to use as you're planning to be able to say, oh, I could do better here, or I could add another option here. Thinking about supporting those students to have access, support, and executive function skills in each of these areas of engagement, representation, and action and expression. Okay, so now I want to show you this sample science lesson plan. It's a very simple lesson plan, but let's practice thinking about this from a UDL framework. So there's a warm-up discussion. There's a direct instruction where the teacher explains characteristics of each state. This is for, of course, it's a science lesson for states of matter. The objective is that students will be able to describe and compare solids, liquids, and gases. There's a demonstration area, group activity, time for review, and then an exit ticket. So I want you to think just for a second, and if you'd like to add something in the chat, is there anything here that you would change or add based on the conversation that we've just had? And I'll give everybody a minute to kind of think about that. And I'm not sure if you can turn your microphone on if you'd like to talk out loud, but I'm happy for that as well. Let's see if we can see anything in the chats.
If you wanted to unmute yourself, please do it and share your thoughts about the conversation that we just have had today. Thank you.
Any ideas about what we could add?
Unmute yourself, please.
Everyone's shy.
Hannah, you
That's
are
okay.
raising your hand. Please start.
Yes, yeah, Noha, thank you so much, Christine, for this engaging and exciting session. Actually, I'd like to add an important aspect to this part, which is part related to warm up, how to excite my students and how to make the students highly excited to know more information about the topic I'm going to deliver in the classroom through providing some aspects related to warm up in the classroom before I deliver them the information by myself.
Yeah, so the warm up is really one of the most important parts, right? Because that's where you're really going to grab their attention. So any kind of a hook that you can get and make it relevant to them. So for example, in this case, states of matter, we live here in Florida. So one of the things that my students in here in Florida are interested in is things like ice, because we don't have a lot of ice unless it's in the freezer. But how that works and how, I would talk to them about the frozen tundra and how different parts of the world are so cold that the water is frozen all the time. And they just couldn't believe it because they grow up here in Florida and they can't imagine a river freezing. So being able to find that hook that you can get them interested in that's relative to them and their cultural experiences. So in this lesson plan, for example, I might allow students to choose how they would want to participate in the warm-up discussion. So I'd have a question that maybe you put on the board, but what do you know about solids, liquids, and gases? So how would they participate with that? They could write something down. They could put something on sticky notes. They can do it digitally. They can talk to their friends. They can come up with maybe a little play about what it's like to be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. But connecting that to real life context and asking students then to share everyday examples of what solids, liquids, and gases that they encounter throughout the day, either in food or drinks or household objects. This really starts to get them excited about well, I never thought about the difference between a solid, a liquid, or a gas and what that means. So this helps them to relate personally to the lesson's content. So that's what you're trying to do. And go ahead.
Yes, Christina, can I add something related to warm up? I think that it will be very good if I show the students some pictures related to the gas, liquids, and solids, and I ask them to identify which picture reflects solid, liquid, or gas. Um, I usually use these activities with the teachers who participate in a course that equips them and empower them to be highly equivalent, to be highly qualified to teach science and mathematics in international schools or language schools. As you know, in Egypt, some teachers deliver the material in Arabic, but if those teachers would like to transfer from Arabic school to international or language school, they have to participate in courses to be fully prepared to teach science and mathematics in English. So when I start the micro teaching section and I deliver them the action plan or how to deliver the lesson, I usually share with them some activities related to warm up, related to pictures, videos, or audios, or something like that.
Yeah, that's excellent. And having all of those different means is really important for not only the teachers learning too, but then being able for them to be able to share that with the students. And so you have a very diverse group, right? Not only a diverse group of students, but a diverse group of teachers that come from very, very different perspectives. So meeting them where they are is going to be really important. Excellent. So again, when we think of engagement is how students are able to participate in the discussion and what that looks like. And then representation, so showing diagrams or short videos, like you just said, for that students can then review later. And you can combine these with the live demonstration. And then
May I add something, please, Dr. Christine?
yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the very informative session. Thank you, Dr. Noha. My addition will be for the diverse classes to have an inclusive game. Maybe we can play a game blindfolded to hold the texture of each material, like the ice, the water, and maybe the gas. We can blow in the hands of the students in order to recognize the difference between gas, solid, and liquid. This is one. Yeah. So this matches very much the UDL concept. So thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
But I love that mostly too, because it involves so many different senses, because it takes away your eyesight, but it involves touch and feel and smell. And, that was another thing. I always tried to use as many senses as I could, different senses when thinking about not just looking, but being able to feel and really be part of the lesson. So I love that so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear.
I have an addition, please. One of the ways to engage students in the course or in what they are studying is making them reflect through either the exit ticket or the Padlet. So they could write their opinions on the Padlet. And one of the activities I was introduced to in a training was 2 stars and a wish. So the 2 stars, they write, the person is supposed to write 2 things he liked and wish whether how this thing will be applied, or how to, if he wants to learn more about it, or how he would apply what he learned in his future. So this is another activity that I was introduced to and I really liked.
I like that too. I like, especially because there's the reflective aspect for the student to be able to think about their learning and what they want to do with it. So I love that so much. Thank you. I'm sure we have so many ideas that, when you start thinking in a UDL framework and you start thinking, oh, wait, I'm already doing this. How can I make it better? How can I deepen the understanding in this UDL framework? So I'm very, very excited to hear everything. All right, so I have another example. I want to make sure that we're staying on time too. I think we're doing well on time. So Ahmed is a 13-year-old student who struggles with reading. His teacher assigns a history reading passage and expects all the students to read silently, then answer written questions. Ahmed can't keep up, so he gives up and becomes frustrated and disengaged. So what are some strategies that you think we can do using the UDL framework to be able to help him to stay engaged and to be able to access the knowledge? And then also think about what is the barrier that is here that, I mean, the teacher's giving him a history lesson, it's a history class. What barrier is he facing right now? Again, feel free to unmute or add to the chat.
Can I add?
I may think of some barriers here. So we have a 13-year-old student, and if he is given a passage in a specific subject like history, one barrier may be the vocabulary that he is meeting if he is not introduced to it. A second barrier may be silent reading, because not all students, especially at this age, can focus and concentrate while reading silently. A third barrier I may think of is if he is doing it alone. Sometimes they need to work in pairs to keep engaged. So these are three barriers I thought of. So if the teacher acted proactively and thought about these barriers, he may include something like pre-reading activity, introducing some key vocab, for example, or presenting maybe like an infographic about the main events mentioned about history from the passage. He may even allow students to work in pairs to do the passage.
I
Thank
love
you.
that. I
Yes,
love the idea.
May I add something, Christine, please?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe the students is struggling with reading because he is dyslexic, for instance. So we need to consider the dyslexic font in writing the material for students, and we need to provide other activities rather than reading for hard readers, for students suffering from dyslexia, for instance, or something like that.
Yes, absolutely. That's amazing. You guys are right on it. So the
Okay.
barrier, this lesson is the lesson was designed for students that are reading proficiently at this letter, right? And you came up with some more too. So definitely there are a lot of barriers here that the teacher can think about ahead of time. One of the suggestions that you had is the pre-reading and the vocabulary. And I just want you to think about that's going to help this student. But how many other students do you think it would help? Probably all of them in some way or shape or form. So the UDL designed lesson here, the teacher can provide reading in multiple ways, such as text or audio. You know, the research that we've seen with reading along with listening to an audio text improves reading skills dramatically. So when my children were younger, there was not a lot of research out there about what this looked like, but I have a son who's dyslexic and I would give him audiobooks. And to this day, he listens to audiobooks all the time. He hates reading. He's never going to be a good reader, but he listens to audiobooks all the time. So he still has access to all of that knowledge without having to worry about his dyslexia. So
Can I add one
key,
little thing, please?
yes, please.
Thank you so much for having me today. You're great. One thing could be like the student is a reluctant student. He doesn't have any interest in the reading itself. So we need to find a way of his own. What do you like to read about animals, about buildings, about schools, about people? And then we go ahead and start with that.
Yes, absolutely. And it's
Yeah.
really for me as a teacher, the greatest thing I can do and the thing that I find the most joy is lighting that spark in a student for them to want to know more about a topic. And we can do it. We can connect things in so many different ways. And when you see that student light up, it's why I became a teacher. So again, I want to stress that we're not lowering expectations for these students because we're providing different ways of expression or representation. We want to
Okay.
remove barriers so that every student has this chance to meet those expectations. So don't
Okay.
feel like that you have to lower expectations. For example, this student, he has difficulty reading this. He still needs to be expected to have the knowledge of the history lesson, but we can find different ways for him to be able to access that knowledge and become motivated.
May I add something?
Yes.
Okay, after the teacher makes every possible things like learning aids and explaining vocabulary, using flashcards or even some drawings on the board or wherever he uses. But we can divide the class into groups and make something like jigsaw reading in order to make this student involved and engaged with a small group of other students who may help him to understand the passage or the reading itself. And he
Yes.
will be enthusiastic to do with or to work with his colleagues, classmates, in order to do the job well. So he will be engaged. It's better than leaving him reading alone or just be silent until the task is finished.
I love that. I would do that in my classroom often, is have different groups with different levels of students. And I
Yeah.
always love that depending on the concept we were talking about, different students were the authority at
Yeah.
different times. So everybody got to be the authority. And I always try to intentionally make sure that all of my students at some point throughout the course would be able to have that authority and have that confidence to be able to explain.
Great.
Christine,
Yeah.
can I add something?
I was going to say one of the things that we already know too is that when you teach something, you learn it more deeply. So giving your students opportunities to teach somebody else, it's going to help that peer student, but it's also going to help them understand the content more too. So I have a couple more slides and then I'm happy to open it up to questions as well. So I want you to think about where you begin. And I don't want you to think about that you need to take that graphic that I showed you and start everywhere at once. Start small. Think about what you're doing already and how it already fits in. It sounds like many of you already are using a lot of these concepts. You don't have to change everything overnight. And you don't have to change everything. What you're doing is amazing, and you know that what you're doing is amazing. So keep the things that are amazing and then start small, adding some new concepts based on the conversation that we're having tonight. You can start with one lesson that you're already teaching. If you see how you can improve that to be maybe offer a choice of engagement. So if you have a lesson where, students are writing one paragraph, maybe some students can write one paragraph and some students could create a video, or some students could make an infographic or something like that. And then use the tools that you already have. You don't need to go out and find new lesson plans or find new materials, but you already have a lot of tools available to you. So use what you have. And then reflect on what you're doing and expand gradually, one step at a time. We can't expect any of us to be able to change everything overnight, but with all of us working together, one step at a time, we will reach our goal. And then I also wanted to talk about some of the barriers that you're going to face as you think about using universal design for learning. Some of them are listed here. Limited resources, especially with technology. Not everybody has access to good technology. Technology is our friend and will change the way that we educate our students, especially in the future with artificial intelligence, which is a whole nother subject and topic that we'll talk about at another time. But that's going to be a barrier. Large class sizes, rigid curriculum, high stake exams, lack of training, perceptions of what UDL means more work. These are all barriers that you can face, but we have solutions for those too. So We can show low-tech strategies like visuals and printed organizers if you don't have access to technology. For large class sizes, again, emphasize the small steps like offering just 2 content options. And you don't have to redesign your lessons for every single student. And then UDL can support exams because we're improving the access to the information. So hopefully we're improving comprehension and retention as well within the required content. So that's going to help students to be able to pass those exams. And then building confidence gradually, attending things like this and other, going on to the CAST website is really important. There's a lot of information out there about how to improve your lessons, especially with this UDL framework. And then UDL design smarter. We don't want you to work harder. Teachers work hard enough already. We want to be able to reduce the amount of work that you're doing to be able to help our students. So I have one more video that I want to show you, which really kind of ties it all together. And it's only a few minutes long.
Says if a flower isn't thriving, check the soil. So it's a good one, right? Because if a flower is dying, it doesn't look too great, makes your garden look funny, it's very easy to clip it out and put it in the compost. Put your resources into getting rid of the flower. But in reality, if a flower is dying in a garden, they need water, they need light, they need to be free of slugs, they need to have space. Like the conditions that flower needs are environmental. And so this to me is UDL, because in our special education model, we put all our resources into the students. But if we understand that disability is an identity that can't be changed, we would save some resources for the garden and for the gardener. And so to me, UDL is resources for the garden, because if you actually understand that a plant is dying because they need more sunlight or they need more water, and you give that to the garden, all the plants are going to benefit from that.
So when a flower doesn't bloom, you don't pluck the flower. You fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. And that's the last thing that I'd like to say about this topic, is that we are fixing the environment. We don't need to fix our students. They're already amazing. So I'm happy to take questions. I'm going to stop sharing now so I can see. There we go. Does anybody have any questions? Comments?
Yes, please. Can I say my question or I write in the comment?
Yes, or in the chat.
Okay. What is the difference between the UDL and the holistic approach? And can we use them in return? Can we make a balance between them?
Yes, I think so. Yes, definitely. So the UDL is a framework. It's really a suggestion on how to do this, but there's many other similar frameworks out there. I think the key is understanding that every student has a different way of accessing knowledge and of learning. And it's up to us, again, to create the environment that allows every student to thrive, whatever that looks like.
Okay, thank you.
So I see there's a question about more resources on UDL. Again, I would go to the cast.org website. All the resources that you could possibly imagine are listed there. That's usually my one-stop shop. There's many videos, and in my slide deck at the end, I have a couple of links to some more resources as well.
I would like to thank you so much, Kristen, for this nice topic, and I feel it can be very beneficial. I just have a question. Is there a recommendation for which grade or which phase of education it's preferred to start UDL?
Yes, preschool. Start early. All the way through. This framework is designed that you can use this at every level.
Thank you.
And I would do that as well. With our very young students, especially, we want them to learn to love learning. And that's why I got interested, especially in Universal Design for Learning, because it's a framework to help you to have students engaged. And when they're engaged, they begin to love learning. There's so many things now in schools that we kill that desire of curiosity and and, the desire to be able to know more. But if when you look at a 3-year-old, all they want to do is know everything. And there's nothing better than that. And sometimes when we get into schools, we kill that because we want them to memorize this or to, do it exactly the way that we want them to do it. And that's not what learning is about. We want to make lifelong learners. And we need to make sure that students understand that they have agency in their learning process and to be able to continue that and hold on to that for the rest of their life.
Okay, may I
So,
ask a question?
using this type, can it help in dealing with some I'm not talking about disengagement inside classroom. I'm talking about some deep learning problems or issues.
So you have to think about that a little bit differently. So yes, it can up to a certain point, but you're still going to have to address what those learning issues are. For example, a student with dyslexia is going to need audio and visual supports, but do they have other issues? Do they have dysgraphia where they have fine motor issues or problems with writing? Do they have other issues that are going to prevent them from being able to understand the lessons? And you usually can tell that because they become disengaged, right? So a lot of bad behaviors that we see in classrooms are because students don't have access to understanding what that learning process is like for them. They have never been able to do it before because they didn't have the supports that they needed to overcome the barriers that they have. And then, so that comes out as bad behaviors sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes. So it's being able to get to know that student, find out what that student's barriers are. What are the things that are preventing that student from becoming engaged in the lesson and from becoming interested in the lesson? What are those barriers in front of that student? Sometimes you have to go and talk to the families, and sometimes you have to sit down and talk with that student to say, what's going on here? I see you're frustrated by this lesson and that you're not interested in this. Can you tell me more? Tell me why. What's preventing you from being successful? A lot of times the students don't know either, but that's where we as experts come in, and we do our research and we take our expertise and we say, okay, well, let's see, is the student engaged? No? Well, why not? And what can I do to provide an engagement lesson for this student? What can I do to remove that barrier of dyslexia or dysgraphia or something else? It may be a behavior issue. It may be some other kind of intellectual disability. So what can I do as the expert that I am to be able to remove those barriers? And when you're stuck, go back to the framework and go through the chart and be able to say, okay, well, I've done this and I've done this, and what's the next thing that I can do? And then talk to your colleagues as well. There's a lot of here.
Okay, may I ask a question or a clarification?
Sure.
Is gamification or using games a part or a step of UDL, or just an activity in the UDL, or is it does it work side by side with UDL? I'd like a clarification about this step, because using games makes students entertained as well as educated, and this is the core of the UDL. So I'd like a clarification about this.
Yeah, so I mean, so there's a lot of research too about gamification and how that is increasing motivation. But if we look at how students play video games, if you think about the idea of video games, they love it because they have a task or a challenge and they overcome it, and they're excited about that and they want to do it again.
Sure.
And isn't that what we're trying to get them to do with learning, right? Is we're going to give them a task or a challenge just enough that it's a little bit challenging, but that they can reach that challenge and then they want to do it again. So I don't know if you guys play any of those online games, but I love playing some, especially word games online, because they're challenging, so it makes me think. And if
Involved,
I,
engaged,
yeah, so I'm so
enthusiastic. Yeah.
There's one game called Connections that we laugh about because it's really hard.
Mm.
And I only play that once a week because it's really hard. So, and I don't always do it and I get frustrated and I was like, I'm not playing that game anymore. It's really hard. It's a challenge, but it's too much of a challenge. Like I can't, I need to spend more time on that. And it kind of hurts my brain. So say anytime you're learning anything, and we know this with our own experience, when learning is fun, when it's entertaining, when you like the subject, you want to spend more time on it. You want to know more. You want to become curious about it. When it's too difficult, it's that zone of proximal knowledge, right? When it becomes too difficult, you become disengaged. It's like, oh, I can't do it. I can't do it. So you have to find that zone. But if you, I find making and learning entertaining.
Yeah.
I don't see anything wrong with that because I think that's how humans have learned to learn, that it becomes fun, and learning should be fun. I love to learn. I'm constantly learning new things every day. I enjoy the process. I wish there's more time in the day. There's so much to learn right now, especially with artificial intelligence. But
Maybe
yeah, we
some
need
electronic platforms make students
Yeah.
enthusiastic to do it. Maybe even some simple things I can do in the class. If I say accountable noun, you have to stand up. If it is uncountable, you have to sit down. And it makes them enthusiastic and laughing and grab
Yeah.
the idea of this.
But isn't that what we want in every classroom, right? To make it fun. We want students to love to come to school.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Christine,
Thank
can I
you.
ask about something, please?
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay. I just want to ask about the framework of universal design. Universal design learning. I want to ask about the framework. Do you think that when we design the framework, we have to consider the age group, either they're young learners, adults, or university students? And what about the level of the students, either they're high achievers or low achievers? Should I, as a university teacher, consider these aspects to design something which is very comprehensive, beneficial, and extremely supportive and beneficial to all students?
Yes, so that's an important aspect, right? Because you do have to take into account the level of the students that you're teaching and where each one of them are and who's coming in. But you also want to make sure that they're all kind of at the same place, right? So how would you do that? In the beginning, especially if you're at higher university, you should start by making sure that that each student has the background knowledge needed to be able to continue with your course. So what does that look like? Is it a vocabulary sheet? Is it an article that they need to read or a video that they need to watch to make sure that, that this is the content that you should already be familiar with to be able to move forward in this course? Math courses are a perfect example for that because we know in math classes, every concept builds on previous concepts. So if you're weak in one area of a math concept, it's going to affect you when you go into a higher level math class. So making sure that our students, when we begin, are at least at the level that they can continue that learning process and find a way to catch them up on that. And then using the framework, again, the framework is a suggestion of how to kind of think that you're meeting the needs of your students. So thinking about, for example, the math class, okay, in the beginning of the course, I'm going to have students take a quiz to see where they are in their math experience and where I might need to reteach something, or where I might need to give certain students some additional homework or some additional lessons to make sure that they do have those concepts for what's coming down the line, for what I'm going to be teaching in the future. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank
It
you.
really works.
Excuse me, may I step in?
Yes, please.
Thanks for this amazing topic, firstly.
Okay, and I wanted to say that I think this UDL will be a challenging thing for institutions that don't have different ways of assessment, as we have a design to meet all our students' abilities and needs and make the learning process is fun. But what about these institutions that have only the traditional way of assessment of tests?
I understand we have the same
Agree?
thing here. Yeah, it's the same thing here in the United States. We have assessments that all students can take. But keep in mind, it's about accessing that knowledge, right? So they take the assessments together, but before that, we're using different techniques and different processes for them to be able to understand and comprehend the information. So once they get to the assessment, it's not so bad because they've been able to access that knowledge and access that learning in different ways to meet their needs. Whereas before, you know, if you teach to the test, for instance, and if you teach students, this is the question and this is the answer, and this is the question and this is the answer, and they're not engaged in that learning, they're not going to do well on the assessment. But if you teach them the concept and the understanding of, oh, this concept, for example, the states of matter is really interesting and fascinating. Let me tell you about this, and you know, showing them and demonstrating to them and getting them involved in understanding what states of matter are. Then when it comes to the assessment, they're going to have that ingrained in their brain because they've seen it in multiple ways and they've been engaged with it, and it's going to stay within those areas of their brain. So they're going to do better on those assessments because now they're engaged with the information and retaining it in their brain. Whereas before, if they're not engaged, they're not going to do well no matter what you do. They're going to memorize and they're going to be able to answer some of the questions, but they're not going to have that deep understanding that those assessments are looking for.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, and that's a thing. I can go on another story about assessments, but when we as professional teachers need to make sure that we're assessing our students correctly too, and that they're being assessed on what our goals are. So what are our goals? You know, there's a lot of people out there that are making assessments that are not educators, and that's one of the biggest problems, but that's a whole nother topic.
Yes, and there's another challenge for a differentiated assessment, Chris, if you don't mind. We need to have a kind of a reservoir for equivalent alternatives for
Yes.
different exams to ensure that to ensure fairness, that
Yes.
that each model is fair and
Yes.
equal. So this
Yes.
is another very problematic area.
Yes. And I'm not anti-assessment. You know, I get on a soapbox sometimes. I believe that we do need to assess our students and we need to understand what they know and what they don't know. It's the high stakes assessments and the way that we're given one test to every student that I don't agree with, because all students are different. And, you know, I was one of those students. I'm dyslexic. And when it came to those high stakes tests, I did terrible on them. And I could never understand why, because I knew the content and I was smart, but that's just not my gift. So being able to, especially for students that have so much riding on it, like where they're going to go to college or what program they're going to be in, is to be able to have a one type of assessment for that. I don't agree with. And we as professionals should really, I try to, but if we all work together to stand up and say this is wrong and we need to change this, I think we can make a difference.
Hello, may I ask my question?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Christine, for the very engaging and informative presentation today. Actually, I have a problem with UDL. Sometimes, you know, you have to be well prepared for the class and you have to have your own lesson plan designed for the class. But let's say sometimes the plan fails me. Because let's say I teach 4 classes of grade 4 level. It works in one class, but it doesn't work in the other classes. My classes are designed randomly, like all the students are actually random level. So I can't imagine how the UDL lesson plan will work in all the classes when it's designed by the same teacher, but different students.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
So I would start small and just start thinking about what you're already doing in those courses that are based around the UDL. And the framework, again, it's a suggestion. Start small, and you don't have to use every single thing every single time. It's what's going to work best for you and your students. It's making sure that your students, again, have access to the lesson that you're trying to partake, that you're trying to portray. So if you have students in one class and maybe they need a video, and in another class, they are good with text, and in another class, they want a podcast. I'm just giving some suggestions. That's okay. But you as the teacher, as you're designing your lesson, that same lesson you're giving to 4 different classes, being able to have the tools available in the beginning of that design process for each one of those groups and meeting them at each one of those groups. That's what UDL is thinking about it ahead of time. It's not trying something for this class, but it doesn't work for that class. We want to think about what can we have available so that we're going to meet each class where they are. So you're not designing 4 different things. You design that one thing and it helps everybody. And that's the idea behind UDL, is thinking ahead of time and where you're meeting your students. And it's always good if we know that ahead of time. Sometimes we don't. So thinking ahead of time of what barriers my students may be facing, designing to make sure that I'm removing those barriers for my students, and then I don't have to do the work later.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
So one of the questions, isn't starting small will make clever students feeling bored? Well, if they're feeling bored now, then maybe that's where you start small. How can you have something available for them so that they're not feeling bored? And maybe that's where you start. So we're not, when I talk about the margins, I'm not talking about students with disabilities that are struggling. I'm also talking about those gifted students that are feeling bored. So think about those students. What barriers are they facing in terms of their learning? Because now they're disengaged. Well, UDL is about engagement. So what other lessons can I have in my toolbox so that when I have a student that's feeling bored, because I'm still working with students that are in the learning process, that I can give them. And one of the things that I used to do would be to give those students the opportunity to peer teach. If you're bored, okay, I have to work with this student. I can't do that right now. So you teach this student this lesson. And again, teaching is such a great way of understanding content more deeply. So I hope that helped. Yeah, UDL is another word for differentiation, but it goes a little bit deeper than differentiation because we're not really differentiating the lesson itself. We're differentiating the access to the information. So it's a little bit deeper. Gamification we talked about. Was there anything else that I missed here? You know, we're coming right up to our time, and I know it's late for you guys, so.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Christine, for an incredibly insightful and inspiring session on universal design for learning, your passion for inclusive education, your expertise in STEM and AI, and your deep commitment to empowering every learner have truly resonated with all of us tonight.
Thank
Your
you so
message,
much.
thank you very much. Your message reminded us that unlocking the student potential starts with designing learning environment that embrace diversity, foster accessibility, and leverage innovation. On behalf of Edu-Next-AI community, we extend our sincere gratitude for your time, knowledge, and dedication to educational excellence. We look forward to continuing the conversation and putting these ideas into action in our own learning spaces. Thank you again, and
From Egypt to the world, we don't just teach, we transform, we lead, we build the future together. This is Edu-Next-AI. ignite bowing minds with knowledge and insight. The next generation starts here, and why? Because tomorrow begins at Edu-Next-AI.